Drawn by the urge to dissect a young, healthy body, he ended up assisting. But his relative?
우리는 닥터 friends.
Hi, we're Dr. Friends. Today's theme is medical history again.
I enjoy it. I've been looking forward to this.
Today, we're finally covering anatomy's history.
Oh, anatomy.
When you think of med students, they're always lugging around an anatomy textbook, right?
Exactly, anatomy all the way.
Funnily enough, our first ever video was about
Oh,
doctors discussing dissection lab.
right. That was our first video.
Our first one.
Actually, Dr. Lee ranked first in anatomy.
Yes, number one, I did well. Anatomy feels like the centerpiece of med school.
Right. It's symbolic.
It was almost 8 credits.
Has it always been 8 credits?
In the past, bodies decayed quickly.
Let's check it out. What's the oldest record of dissection?
I'm guessing ancient Greece.
I think BC.
Actually, there are many such accounts. Like when someone saw slashed an opponent's abdomen and the contents spilled out.
Stuff just came out.
But they found what he had eaten. That sort of thing can count as an anatomical note, going back 3000 BC.
If they saw undigested food, they must have opened the upper stomach.
Yes,
If it were lower, they'd find feces.
it'd be feces. But aside from that kind of stuff, Egypt is still the oldest. Can't skip it
As
3000 BC.
expected.
Because they made mummies.
Right? They took out what spoiled fast.
You'd think that meant deep anatomical knowledge,
Yep, they placed organs in canopic jars and so on.
but not quite. Because only nobility got mummified.
They couldn't fully open them.
They couldn't do a huge incision, just a small one, so they'd reach in and pull things out, then categorize them. So they knew stuff, what was in there, but how it connected or what each organ did.
They didn't know.
It was more a practical process. There are similar records in China. They go back to maybe 2000 or 1000 BC. They included ideas like yin and yang, the 5 elements, and something circulating inside. We might guess they were referring to something like lymph, but we can't say for sure.
Exactly.
Babylon and Mesopotamia have parallel stories, but dissection done purely to understand the body like doctor. Oh, said truly started in ancient Greece. There's someone called the father of modern anatomy.
Michelangelo.
The Renaissance.
Right.
Sorry, that was clueless.
Sorry,
You know,
Who was it?
that's Da Vinci.
Renaissance again?
Oh man, read something, will you?
I should have stopped after one mistake. I'm hooked on the Renaissance.
Anyway, moving on, Herophilus, the father of modern anatomy, was amazing. He could tell arteries apart from veins. He was really ahead of his time. Aristotle thought the heart had 3 chambers, believing the right atrium was just another vessel. But Herophilus said, no, there are 4. Also, he amazed everyone by distinguishing nerves from tendons, muscles, and vessels, showing that nerves are key to movement. He found 2 types of nerves, some tied to sensation.
How do you figure that out?
Yeah, how do you think he knew? He also separated the cerebrum from the cerebellum. Before that, people believed thinking happened in the heart, and the brain just cooled emotions. They saw the brain as a cooling chamber, but Herophilus insisted it's where we actually think. He also showed the uterus is hollow and pointed out structures in the tests like the epididymis and seminal vesicles where sperm is made, and even the prostate. How? Noticing their shape is one thing.
But the function?
How did he figure that out? How?
Maybe he treated tons of injuries. Was there a war?
Or removed bits and watched what happened.
Herophilus mostly worked in Alexandria. It was originally Egyptian, but was taken over by Alexander. Though prosperous, it was a bit distant from Greece. Early on, the laws weren't that strict rulers did what they wished. So as a form of capital punishment, they handed prisoners over to Herophilus. He was told to dissect them while they were still alive until death.
Live dissection.
Yes, on living humans.
Wow, until they died.
That's how he discovered nerves existed.
Right, if you cut here, they lose sensation.
Oh, if we did this nerve, pain?
Their arm dropped, but they still felt pain.
Yes, they felt something. So he found there were two types. Even thinking about it now is horrific. Back then, it was unthinkable. It was seen as demonic. It got buried for over 1,000 years after people learned of it, with all his findings branded devilish knowledge.
I can see.
They just couldn't accept it. Recall Greek mythology and paying the ferryman on the river Lethe after death.
Yep, Greek Roman myths.
They firmly believed in the afterlife. Vikings thought you had to die in battle to reach
Yep,
Valhalla.
exactly.
So, dissecting a corpse was seen as corrupting the dead person's soul.
And they did it from when the person was alive right up to their death.
So, he was discredited, and Rome passed a strict law: no human dissection ever.
But animals.
Yes, animals were allowed, but not humans. What about China? That's about when Confucius entered the scene.
Confucianism.
Your body is from your parents? You can't even trim your hair. How could you dissect a corpse?
Right? How dare you?
Are you nuts?
Exactly.
No way. So human dissection was banned in both East and West around the same time.
As societies developed, it felt threatening.
They likely feared violating the body.
And belief in the afterlife was rising around then, too.
It all intensified. Then came Galen. Herophilus is now recognized as modern anatomy's father, but Galen is the father of anatomy, period.
Father of anatomy.
His work is intriguing comparative anatomy.
Comparative anatomy.
Since they couldn't dissect humans, they opened monkeys or pigs. Then they'd have to guess. Maybe it's like this in humans. It gave them a distorted idea of the body, but they couldn't dissect people anyway.
They had no other choice.
Exactly.
Just guesswork.
So, up into the Middle Ages, many surgical mistakes came from Galenic anatomy. They studied animals but operated on humans, which didn't always match. The biggest difference is that animal joints and human joints are reversed. Four-legged creatures,
They bend differently.
so that alone caused huge errors. No one corrected them, and time went on. Then, around the 1200s, things changed. The Crusades began.
The war?
Europe collided with the Islamic world.
Right?
Records suggest that in Islamic regions, maybe going back to Persia, human dissection was somewhat permitted, at least behind the scenes. So, if a noble from one side and a noble the other side got the same injury, the European noble usually died. They can treat him, but the other side survived. You think you've got the upper hand, but you die while the other survives? The
Right.
gap grows, and you can't win the war.
Makes sense.
That's why in the 1200s, the Holy Roman Emperor said, all right, every 5 years, we'll allow one dissection, but only on truly wicked criminals. So if Jin Sung got his turn now, the next one be in 5 years.
Everybody's got a cycle.
Exactly. It had to be someone condemned to hanging, a genuine death row case.
After they're dead?
Yes, but it's only once every 5 years. Now it's Wu's turn. He takes the cadaver home and works alone. But Jin Sung and I are surgeons. We need to learn. At least let us watch. That's why dissections in Europe became public spectacles. It's reason why there's no way to slow decomposition. It started with the fastest. Brought in parts, like the abdomen, and worked non-stop.
People just watch.
Yep, they watched for 2 or 3 days straight. I've heard some people even died from exhaustion during these. But whether or not you dissected drastically affected your anatomical knowledge, and thus your surgical skill. Plus, some doctors couldn't keep their mouths shut. They'd learn, then go home and tell their friends, the dissection was wild. Humans look like this. The body's set up like that. They'd talk, and the public got super curious. Some people even offered to pay just to watch. That's how dissection theaters took off. They'd gather crowds, do the dissection. Lay people could watch. Med students were closer. A whole culture formed around it.
Gruesome, it became part of festivals.
So if a carnival lacked a dissection, citizens would ask, what's our noble doing?
Every local fair had a dissection.
Yes, that was the vibe. Then in the 15th and 16th centuries, the Renaissance happened. Finally, medieval Europe returned humanism.
Back to focusing on people.
They shifted from afterlife to present life, so dissections became more encouraged. Plus, with the public viewing them in a theatrical way, it turned into performance, spectacle, and art. Leonardo da Vinci really cemented that connection. They'd exhibit cadavers like sculptures. We know art students still learn anatomy for drawing. That's why artists back then took it up too. So if you look at those old anatomical sketches, Da Vinci's are often more accurate than later anatomists and artistically better. That basically killed off this every 5 years rule. Once someone was hanged, the body went straight to artists or doctors.
Demand skyrocketed.
Demand grew, so many bodies went to artists. Doctors still didn't get enough. But as surgery advanced, they wanted more. I did too. Thinking, if I dissect, I might be better at surgery than my mentor. So we reached the 19th century. London, really London.
The place of that infamous killer.
It was when Dr. Liston was busily sawing off limbs.
Liston was relatively okay.
It's around 1830. In 1830s London, 7 gangs got arrested. The charge: grave robbing. Normally you'd think they'd steal valuables. Here, they took the bodies themselves, steal corpses, and sell to doctors.
They lack convicts,
Not enough.
So they just dug up newly buried folks immediately.
then sold them quick.
Right away, yes. Even the gravekeepers were often involved. So those 7 gangs got nabbed, the ringleaders were hanged. Their bodies, where'd they go?
Right
Exactly
back to
straight to them. It went so far that there was a cemetery nicknamed Bully's Acton. London was a total slum, not like modern cemeteries. They'd stack coffins on the top of each other. From just one cemetery, 1,500 to 2,000 bodies had vanished every year.
Wow.
It was huge. Oddly, grave robbers sometimes did a twisted favor, because diagnosing death was hard and people got buried alive.
Well, that story.
They'd open a coffin, find the person alive, maybe say, "Oh, wow," and run away. But worse ones would knock them out to smuggle the body anyway. This was widespread. A bunch of famous anatomy professors emerged then. For ENT, there was Gichard Joseph Duvernay, who mapped out the ear's anatomy, like how the cochlea looks, which was really tough.
It's so deep, fragile, and sensitive.
Yes, it's bone within bone. So there were tons of trial and error. Yet he got it done. Over about 30 years, he regularly bought corpses from cemeteries outside Paris. That alone was unethical, but something scarier emerged. William Burke and William Hermhare came up with an idea. If we're gonna sell bodies, why not produce them ourselves before burial? If they saw a lone passerby, one would distract, the other would strangle them, all to sell the body. Forensic science was primitive. They're known to have killed at least 16 people. A professor named Knox had regular dealings with them, and he had to know. Because grave robbed bodies don't show strangulation marks. But there's always
What?
dead. All those bodies had strangulation marks. Knox knew, yet he couldn't resist dissecting fresh, healthy adults.
Not someone who died from disease.
He kept going.
It's different dissecting a healthy person.
How'd they get caught? Knox was found out first, then Burke and Hare.
Did someone recognize the body during dissection?
How'd they know?
Probably in the process.
An assistant came in, recognized it was their own relative.
Wow.
I guess he hadn't come home the day before, so there'd been no funeral or anything. Suddenly here he was, strangled. Then the assistant realized all Knox's dissection bodies had that same mark and reported. That led to Burke and Hare being arrested and hanged. What's more horrifying is that right after Burke was executed, another professor dissected him in front of a crowd, showing his brain. Meanwhile, Hare also got the noose, but the rope snapped and he ran for it, and they never caught him, said to have survived. One ended up dissected. The professor wasn't executed, but was banished from his teaching post. He later moved to London and continued his work in anatomy because, for all his wrongdoing, his expertise was immense, and they couldn't fully shun him. Through all these gruesome events, anatomy kept progressing. Some people claim Nazi or Japanese. Unit 7 and 3-1 experiments aided anatomy, but I checked various papers and found no evidence. Their experiments were all about killing, not advancing medical knowledge.
Like testing how fast people would die from certain drugs.
Right? That didn't help medical progress at all. Eventually, formalin was invented, and that was huge. It let you dissect a single cadaver for a long time.
Yes,
It
exactly.
allowed multi-day dissections and let multiple people view the same specimen, dropping the demand for cadavers. That opened the door for modern, more humane cadaver donation programs. And that's basically when modern anatomy was complete.
Exactly.
We finally figured out how our bodies are structured, and thanks to that history, we can do dissection labs in med school.
It's horrific.
That really was a dreadful backstory. Remember how we used to complain about formalin?
Yeah, we did.
It's vital and absolutely essential.
Indeed.
We'll be back with more fascinating medical history next time.
Thanks.